The ballroom froze. 500 eyes, all on her. Mark smiled, lifted his glass, and then pulled his ex into the spotlight. Elena is back. Sarah, accept this, or the wedding is over. Gasps cut through the music. Sarah's chest tightened. Years of love, sacrifice, and trust shattered in a single sentence. But when she smiled, calm, unshakable, final, the room didn't know what hit them, because that one word would change everything, and nothing would ever be the same again. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mr. James Family Channel. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Whether it's your first time or you've been part of the family for a while, a huge hug from me to you. I'd love to get to know you better, so tell me in the comments where you're watching from, what part of the world you're joining me from, and say hi. I can't wait to read all your messages and connect with every single one of you. Let's make today amazing together. The ballroom glowed like a promise that was never meant for her. Light spilled from chandeliers like liquid gold. Every surface reflected wealth, glass, crystal, polished marble. Music floated softly, rehearsed to sound romantic, practiced to never offend. The kind of music that filled space but never asked questions. 500 guests filled the room, men in tailored suits, women wrapped in silk and diamonds, laughter that came easily when money made life soft. Sarah stood at the center of it all, still, composed. Her hand rested lightly on Mark's arm, not gripping, not clinging, just present. Her gown fit her perfectly. Ivory silk, clean lines, elegant without trying too hard. She had chosen it after months of hesitation, not because it was expensive, but because it felt like her. Her breathing was slow, measured, careful. No one could see the pressure in her chest, the tightness she had learned to hide years ago. The kind you learn when panic is a luxury you can't afford. This wedding had been built brick by brick. Phone calls, late nights, negotiations, smiles held too long, mostly by her. She remembered folding flyers on a borrowed table, answering emails at midnight, running meetings while eating cold noodles. Mark used to call her his backbone, his balance, the one who kept things real. The guests didn't know that. They saw the billionaire, the visionary, the man who turned nothing into everything. They didn't see the woman beside him as part of the foundation. Mark lifted his glass. The sound was small, but it carried. Conversation softened, laughter faded. The room leaned toward him. Sarah felt the shift, that subtle tightening when attention sharpens. Mark smiled, confident, easy. "I believe in honesty," he said. A few guests nodded. Someone laughed lightly. "So I won't start my marriage with lies." The pause after that sentence stretched too long. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Not loud, curious. Sarah's fingers twitched. Just once. She looked at him, really looked. His jaw was set, his eyes bright, not nervous, prepared. Then he did it. He reached out. The movement was casual, too casual. His hand closed around another woman's wrist, pulled her forward, Elena. She stepped into the light like she belonged there. Red dress, bare shoulders, a smile that already knew the room would forgive her. Mark's hand slid to Elena's waist. Too familiar, too comfortable. A memory, not a mistake. Sarah felt the temperature change, not physically, emotionally. "Elena is part of my life again," Mark said. The words were smooth, practiced. "She's not going anywhere." Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else whispered a name. Mark turned slightly, enough to face Sarah, enough to keep Elena close. "Sarah," he said. Her name sounded different in his mouth now. "You can accept this arrangement." Arrangement. "Or we end this wedding right now." The silence was sharp, clean, cutting. It sliced through music, through breath, through time. Sarah didn't hear the band stop, didn't hear the collective gasp. Sound became distant, like she was underwater. She saw faces instead, wide eyes, averted glances, smiles that froze halfway. She felt heat rush to her skin. Not embarrassment, anger, but deeper than anger was something heavier. Memory, sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor, counting coins before buying groceries, choosing which bill could wait, working 3 jobs, morning shifts, night shifts, weekends that didn't exist. Mark sitting across from her at a small table, talking about ideas, dreams, the future, her nodding, believing. She remembered holding him when investors said no, telling him failure wasn't final, that he wasn't weak. She remembered selling her car, quietly, so he could keep going. She remembered promising herself it would be worth it. The silence pressed in. Mark waited. He expected something. Tears, a plea, a crack. Elena watched Sarah carefully, measuring, curious. Sarah felt her heartbeat slow. Something shifted, not a collapse, a release. The pain didn't vanish. It sharpened, and with that sharpness came clarity. This wasn't love. This was ownership. This wasn't honesty. This was control, dressed up as courage. She realized, in that still moment, that the worst thing had already happened. He had shown her exactly who he was. And somehow, that made breathing easier. Her shoulders lowered. The weight she had been carrying, years of proving, supporting, shrinking, slipped just enough for her to stand taller. She looked at Mark again, not as her future, but as her past. The room waited, and Sarah understood something profound. This was the last moment he would ever hold power over her. Sarah's lips parted. The room leaned forward again. No one knew what she would say, not even Mark. Sarah's lips parted. A single word formed. A word that carried years of restraint, years of sacrifice, and a calm that startled the world around her. Fine. The syllable didn't rush, it didn't tremble, it didn't beg for anyone's understanding. It landed, like a door closing behind her, leaving only choice and consequence. Mark froze. The glass in his hand trembled slightly, not because of fear, because he realized he had no script for this. No one had taught him what to do when control slipped so quietly. The room held its collective breath. Conversations froze mid-laughter. A waiter paused mid-step. The pianist's fingers lingered on the keys. She didn't glance at the guests. She didn't bow to their whispers. She didn't plead or explain. She looked at him. Really looked. Mark thought he knew her. He had loved her, or at least thought he did. He had measured her loyalty, tested it in silent ways, assumed endurance meant devotion. Now he realized he had been wrong. This wasn't devotion, it wasn't obedience, it was clarity, a life measured in respect and self-worth, and she had finally accounted for herself. Her hand rested lightly on the table as the glass touched the surface. Soft, gentle, deliberate, but louder than any shouted demand could have been. The guests shifted, whispered, gasped. Someone's fork clattered. Someone else swallowed hard. She didn't flinch. Mark's mind raced. He tried to anticipate her next move. He expected hesitation, confusion, maybe tears, anything but this. But she moved with purpose. Her smile wasn't wide. It wasn't performative. It wasn't meant to comfort anyone. It was hers, a calm, unshakable, resolute curve of her lips, the kind of smile that made the powerful feel suddenly small. He blinked, twice. He could hear the faint echo of the glass, could see the way the crystal caught the light, could feel the subtle shift in air around her. She was walking toward the edge of the room, not running, not panicking, walking, measured, intentional. Her heels clicked against the marble. Click, click, click. Every step resonated with the weight of her choice. The crowd watched, frozen in a mixture of awe, disbelief, and unease. Mark's heart thudded. For the first time, he understood the power of silence, not the silence of others, the silence of a woman who had nothing to prove. Eleanor stiffened beside him. Her confidence faltered. She had thought herself untouchable. Now she realized she was merely a placeholder in someone else's story. Mark's glass lowered slowly, his breath hitched slightly. Not from anger, not yet. From disbelief. He had rehearsed everything, every reaction, every word, every gasp of the audience, and yet nothing prepared him for this. Sarah had stripped the script. She had removed him from the narrative entirely. The guests' eyes followed her every movement. Men leaned forward in disbelief. Women whispered to each other, their voices low but urgent. Her shoulders were straight, not stiff, not proud, just balanced. A woman unburdened. She reached the ballroom doors. Her hand paused at the handle, not because of fear, not because she doubted herself, but because this was the threshold. A threshold she had been standing at in her mind for years. A place where choice and consequence finally met. Mark tried to speak. His voice stuck somewhere between the room and his throat. He wanted to call her back, to demand, to negotiate, to reclaim what he believed he owned. But no sound emerged. Elena's eyes darted nervously between them. She sensed the shift in the air. She felt the imbalance. The room itself seemed to tilt toward Sarah. The air felt heavier where she walked. The light caught her dress differently. Even the chandelier seemed to hesitate above her. Mark's chest tightened. He had built his life on certainty, on control, on knowing what came next. None of that mattered anymore. The guests sensed it. Some shifted uncomfortably. Some stared, riveted. Sarah didn't stop. She didn't glance back. She didn't wait for applause or pity. Her focus was absolute. Step by step, she closed the distance between herself and freedom. Her fingers brushed the door handle. Cool, solid, a boundary she had chosen. She exhaled, not a heavy sigh, not relief, just a quiet acknowledgement of power reclaimed. Mark's eyes followed every motion. He saw the woman he thought he knew vanish before him. He had expected desperation. He had expected negotiation. He had expected fear. Instead, he saw certainty. And for the first time, he realized he had underestimated her entirely. She pushed the door open. Light spilled across the marble. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't forgiving. It was honest. And she stepped through it. The doors closed softly behind her. Not a slam, not a flourish. Just closure. The room exhaled collectively. Whispers rose. Questions lingered. Shock hung like mist. Mark remained frozen. His hand lowered. The glass slipped slightly. He almost didn't catch it. And in that small, silent moment, he felt powerless for the first time in years. Not because he had lost wealth, not because he had lost status, not even because he had lost face. Because he had lost her respect, and in losing that, he realized he had lost his anchor. He had tried to manipulate loyalty. He had tried to measure endurance. She had measured herself, and in doing so, she had measured him, and he had failed. Outside the ballroom doors, Sarah's hand lingered on the handle for a heartbeat. Her chest rose and fell slowly, deliberately. She could feel the weight of every expectation, every memory, every betrayal she had endured. One decision now would define everything that came next, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Sarah's apartment breathed a different kind of life. Quiet, small, real. The kind of quiet where you could hear your own heartbeat, where the walls didn't pretend to be more than they were. Where no one ever expected anything of you except your presence. She had never sold it, not after the penthouse, not after the charity galas, not after the private drivers, the limousine arrivals, the whispers of socialites who thought they owned her life. She had kept it because it was hers, no pretension, no obligations, just her. Something in her had always whispered, "Keep one door that belongs only to you." And tonight, that whisper carried more weight than the speeches, the chandeliers, the laughter she had left behind. She set her bag down carefully, not rushed, not distracted, just deliberate. Her fingers lingered on the strap for a second longer than needed, a habit, a pause to center herself. Then she noticed him, at her table, the man sitting like he had always belonged, calm, controlled, present, grey suit, sharp lines, no unnecessary flourishes, eyes steady, attentive, leather folder balanced neatly in his hands. He didn't look around, he didn't flinch at the messiness of a real home. He waited, and when he spoke, his voice was measured. "Ms. Sarah Johnson," he said gently, standing. Not abrupt, not demanding. Just there. "I'm Daniel Brooks. I was asked to wait for you." Her heart skipped, not in fear, not in panic, recognition, a pulse of understanding that she hadn't felt since childhood. "My grandfather's lawyer," she said. Simple, clear, no surprise, no hesitation. Daniel nodded. "Your grandfather was very clear. Tonight was the night." His words hung in the air like a promise, like a weight she had carried unknowingly. Sarah took a step closer to the table. Her fingers hovered over the leather folder. She didn't reach immediately. A pause. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel, to remember the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of sacrifice. "Tonight?" she repeated, almost to herself. "Yes," Daniel said, not with urgency, not with impatience, but with the certainty of a man who had seen this moment coming for a long time. He placed the folder carefully on the table. The soft thud was louder than she expected. She looked at it, leather-bound, weighty, important, and somehow alive. It wasn't just a folder. It was a threshold, a door, a key. Her mind raced, but not chaotically, not like it had when Mark had humiliated her hours ago. Calmly, deliberately, she remembered every choice she had made, every sacrifice, every sleepless night she had spent working, waiting, believing. And in that calm, clarity settled over her. Daniel waited, patient, polite, but firm. "Your grandfather wanted to see if you would stand for yourself," he said. Sarah blinked, not because she didn't understand, but because the weight of his words pressed on her chest. Years of invisibility, years of people expecting her to bend, to conform, to serve quietly, and now it was all distilled into one moment, one decision. Daniel opened the folder slightly. Sheets of paper, sealed envelopes, legal documents, yes, but more than that. A declaration, a test, a promise. Her fingers hovered over the edge of the folder, not out of hesitation, out of recognition. She had carried herself through challenges, she had endured, she had built quietly while others watched, and now was the reckoning. Daniel's gaze met hers. "Your grandfather wanted to ensure that whatever comes next," he said slowly, "comes from your own strength, your own choice, not influence, not pressure, not fear." Sarah nodded once, slowly, deliberately. The apartment seemed smaller, tighter, walls pressing gently with expectation. She lifted her hand, one finger touched the folder, then another. She pulled it closer. The leather was cool, firm, like the life that had been waiting for her, patiently, quietly, for years. Daniel leaned back slightly. The pause he allowed was deliberate. It gave her space, and she needed it, to think, to breathe, to let the gravity sink in. This wasn't just money. This wasn't just inheritance. This was acknowledgement, recognition, proof that her strength mattered, and that it had always mattered. Her eyes scanned the documents quickly. She didn't skim. She didn't rush. Every word was a reminder, every clause a measure, every signature a key to a world she had only glimpsed from the outside. She looked up. Daniel's calm eyes never wavered. "Everything you worked for," he said, "was leading to this moment. And your grandfather, he knew you'd arrive here." Sarah's throat tightened slightly. Not from fear, not from anticipation, from recognition, from the realization that she had already proven herself. He handed her a pen, simple, standard. Her hand hovered. She exhaled, long, slow, steady. Then she signed. The sound of the pen against paper was like a heartbeat in the quiet room. A signal, a beginning. Daniel placed the pen down carefully. "Congratulations, Miss Johnson," he said, not lightly, not casually, but with the weight of every expectation she had fulfilled silently for years. Sarah didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. The folder sat before her, open, full, powerful, her life in her hands at last, and she understood something profound, the world she thought she had lost. She had been building all along. Mark, the wedding, the humiliation, all of it had been a distraction, a test she had already passed without knowing it. Her chest rose and fell, her breathing steady, strong, finally free to decide. Daniel's gaze softened. "This," he said, gesturing to the folder, "is everything your grandfather trusted you to claim, but more than that, it's everything he knew you were capable of holding." Sarah didn't need words. The room, the apartment, the quiet, the walls, they all seemed to lean in, waiting, watching, acknowledging. She closed the folder gently, her hands steady, her head high, her heart full, and she understood the power of standing alone, not because she had to, but because she could. Sarah's gaze shifted to the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars she had never touched. A single thought formed in her mind. Now that she had the power, who would she allow into this life next? Daniel opened the folder slowly. His fingers moved with care, deliberate, as if the papers themselves held life. Every page seemed heavier than the last. He placed them gently on the table. "Your grandfather left you a real estate trust valued at $1.2 billion, he said. Sarah blinked. The number echoed differently in her mind. Not excitement, not disbelief, just weight. The weight of responsibility, the weight of truth. Daniel's voice softened. "But there was a clause," he said. Sarah sank into the chair, her back pressed against the wall. The room felt smaller suddenly. The city outside the window shimmered like it didn't belong to her yet. He continued. "He believed money reveals people, reveals character, reveals true priorities, reveals courage and weakness alike." She inhaled slowly. The air filled her lungs and didn't leave immediately. She had spent years giving everything to a man who didn't see her. Mark. And now, this. Daniel spoke again. "So he hid it, even from you." Her fingers rested on the folder. Cold leather, firm edges. She felt the paradox of being invisible and now undeniably visible at the same time. The clause, he explained, was simple, brutal, unforgiving. Sarah would inherit everything, everything she had never known she deserved, only if she walked away from a man who publicly disrespected her power and her worth. Her heart didn't race, her chest didn't tighten, her head tilted slightly. This was not a trap. It was a test. She had always wondered if Mark had ever truly valued her. Not for ambition, not for loyalty, not for love, but for herself. Now the answer was written in ink and legal language. Daniel's voice was quiet, measured. "If you stayed," he said, "the trust would have gone to charity." The words settled in the apartment like snow, cold, crisp, undeniable. Sarah leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed every insult, every expectation, every invisible moment she had carried alone. She didn't feel rich. Not yet. She felt seen, truly seen, and recognized. It wasn't money that gave her this feeling. It was the acknowledgement of her strength. Daniel watched her quietly. No encouragement, no judgment, just presence. A steady reminder that she had made it here, and that the choice was hers. Her thoughts drifted, to Mark, to the ballroom, to the moment she said, "Fine." The clarity of walking away had not come from pride. It had come from understanding her worth, And now that worth had tangible weight. She felt it press lightly against her consciousness, not arrogantly, but firmly, like a hand reminding her she had been carrying herself well all along. Daniel leaned forward. This trust, he said, was designed to give her heirs the foundation she could never have allowed herself to take prematurely. But he trusted your judgment. He trusted your integrity. He trusted that you would make the choice without fear. Sarah exhaled, slowly, measured. Her eyes ran across the documents, scanning clauses, terms, values, not greedily, not obsessively, methodically, because this wasn't about money alone. It was about power, autonomy, recognition of every quiet sacrifice she had endured. And then Daniel did something unexpected. He opened a separate envelope, tied with a black ribbon, marked only with her initials. "Your grandfather left this for you specifically," Daniel said. Curiosity prickled her skin, not nervousness, not doubt, just a quiet thrill, the kind that comes before revelation. Sarah reached for it. The paper inside was thick, handwritten, deliberate, every word weighed carefully. It began, "Sarah, my granddaughter, I have watched you build your life quietly while others assumed control. Tonight is your moment. Remember, strength without humility is empty, and wealth without wisdom is dangerous. Choose wisely." She paused. A breath, a subtle one, almost unnoticed. It was her grandfather's voice, a voice she had barely known. And yet she felt it echo through her. Every challenge, every sleepless night, every compromise she had made, it all converged into this moment of clarity. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel the years, the endurance, the moments where she had stood alone, the moments where she had whispered to herself that she was enough. Now, the universe, through a quiet old man who had understood her completely, was agreeing. Daniel's presence faded into the background, respectful, silent. He knew this was her moment, not his. Sarah opened her eyes, and she saw the opportunity not as a gift, but as a responsibility, one she was ready to claim, one she had already earned. Then a knock came at the door. Sharp, polite, insistent. Sarah froze. Daniel looked up, subtly raising an eyebrow. "I believe she's expecting someone," he said. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but anticipation, because she hadn't just inherited wealth, she had inherited visibility. And visibility brings others, people who notice power when it quietly manifests. She moved to open the door. And there, framed in the dim light of her apartment hallway, stood a man she had never met, tall, imposing, presence unmistakable. Dark eyes, sharp suit. He didn't smile. He didn't announce himself. He waited, like he had been sent by fate itself. Sarah's breath caught. The stranger's gaze didn't flicker. It didn't judge. It only studied her. And she knew in that heartbeat that this encounter would change everything she thought she had earned and everything she had yet to fight for. A week later, Mark lounged in his private office, velvet chairs, polished mahogany, a city at his feet through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Eleanor beside him, smiling, leaning a little too comfortably on the armrest of his confidence. He laughed. Not a small laugh, not a private chuckle. A booming, unrestrained laugh that belonged to a man who had convinced himself he owned the world. And in that moment, he did. Until the phone rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound, breaking, disrupting. Mark reached for it, expecting a call from a client, a lender, a minor inconvenience he could dismiss. He picked up, and his smile vanished, not slowly, not hesitantly, completely. Gone. The laugh evaporated. Elena noticed immediately. "What?" she started, but he didn't answer her. He listened. The room shifted around him. The city outside continued its life, unaware of the storm inside the lounge. Mark's hand tightened on the phone. The veins in his temple pulsed, every muscle in his body strained, waiting, calculating. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Eleanor leaned closer. "Mark," she whispered. He didn't speak. He only hung up. Then the silence fell, thick, heavy, suffocating. Not a sound except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. By sunset, his world had shifted. Lawyers arrived in a panic. Not the usual controlled chaos. Papers rattled. Phones rang endlessly. Emails pinged. Credit lines frozen. Accounts under review. Leases paused. Contracts questioned. Land ownership challenged. A city he had built, brick by brick, empire by empire, seemed suddenly unstable. "Someone owns the ground under your headquarters," one lawyer said, voice tight. "And they've revoked access." Mark's hand tightened into a fist. The room spun, slow and dizzying, as if gravity itself had betrayed him. He didn't respond. He couldn't, not immediately. He drove through the city in silence, the streets he had memorized, the avenues that symbolized conquest and control, now felt unfamiliar. The traffic lights blurred into streaks of color through the windshield. The sun dipped behind the skyline. Shadows grew long across buildings he once considered untouchable. Every turn, every familiar intersection reminded him he had lost something crucial. The building he had called his crown now felt borrowed, temporary, vulnerable. He arrived. Elevator doors opened up, floor by floor, ascending. His mind raced. Contracts, leases, banks, lenders, partners, all fragile now. The door at the top floor stopped him cold. A nameplate, polished metal, engraved perfectly. Sarah Johnson, managing trustee. His heart thumped, not with anger yet, but recognition, shock, fear, all tangled together. He remembered her smile that night, the calm fine that had cut him more deeply than any insult. The quiet apartment where she had accepted her inheritance. He thought it had been powerless. Now he realized he had been wrong. Completely. Every office, every conference, every boardroom he had ever walked into. She now stood at the center of it all. He stepped closer to the door. His fingers brushed the handle, not with ownership, with hesitation, with a realization that control had shifted. Inside, Sarah sat at the head of the massive mahogany desk. Light from the city framed her like a halo, her posture calm, unshaken, her eyes focused. She didn't look up immediately. She was reviewing documents, but every movement exuded authority. Mark's presence, once commanding, now felt intrusive. He cleared his throat. No response. He tried again, louder. Still nothing. The desk, the room, the very air seemed hers. Finally, her gaze lifted. Her eyes met his. No fear, no hesitation, only clarity, only judgment. "You have questions," she said softly. Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His mind scrambled. Contracts, credit lines, leases, headquarters, nothing. She gestured to the seat across from her. He didn't sit. Not yet. She didn't flinch. She didn't demand. She just waited. Mark's chest tightened. It wasn't anger. It was realization. Every empire he had built, every skyscraper he had touched, every deal he had forced into submission, now rested, partially or fully, under the control of the woman he had underestimated. He thought he had tested loyalty. He thought he had measured endurance. He thought he had won. He had not even close. Sarah's calm eyes never wavered. A subtle smile curved her lips, not wide, not taunting, just assured, deliberate. Mark swallowed. His ego recoiled, the first time in decades. The building, the empire, his identity was hers to command, and he had nothing to bargain with. He could feel it in the way his hands shook slightly, the way his jaw tightened. The silence stretched, a test he hadn't anticipated. He tried to speak. Finally, words formed, low, clipped, uncertain. "You... how?" Sarah leaned back. Her hands rested lightly on the desk. She did not answer immediately. She allowed him to feel the weight of the moment, the shift in power, the truth of his underestimation. Then she spoke. Everything you built rested on ground you didn't own. Mark's chest constricted, not disbelief, not shock, a deeper, raw awareness of being undone. Every confident stride, every boastful laugh from the lounge, meaningless. The empire had always been partially hers, now fully in her hands. He wanted to argue, to reclaim, to assert dominance. But the clarity in her gaze silenced him. He had no words that could reach her, no power that could sway her. The city outside, with all its lights, all its noise, all its endless motion, now moved around her. Not him. She was in command. Mark realized fully that he was witnessing a transformation he hadn't anticipated. The woman he had tried to manipulate had become untouchable, and all he could do was watch. Sarah's voice cut through the silence. You thought testing me was clever. You thought humiliation would bend me, but you gave me the keys instead. Mark swallowed hard. The elevator doors chimed behind him. Outside, someone waited, and he knew. The next move would decide everything he had ever claimed to own. Sarah stood as Mark entered the room, not to greet him, not out of courtesy, but to claim the space she had earned. The office was vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below. Light reflected off the polished floors, glinting from a skyline that had once belonged entirely to him. The desk before her was wide, solid, old money wood. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It exuded authority. Mark's steps slowed. Every click of his polished shoes echoed in the cavernous room. He stopped short of the desk, swallowing, tight in his throat, a rare falter in the armor of his ego. Sarah, he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. Why didn't you tell me? Not because he didn't already know she had wealth, not because he hadn't anticipated surprises in business, but because he hadn't expected her to take control of everything he had built. Sarah studied him, every gesture, every micro-expression. The man she had loved, the man who had humiliated her in front of hundreds, the man who had assumed obedience was proof of love. She held his gaze unflinching. I wanted a partner, she said slowly, measured, deliberate, not a performance. The words carried weight, not just accusation, not just disappointment, but truth. Mark's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, trying to reclaim some semblance of command. I was testing loyalty, he said. The words sounded hollow even to him. She didn't flinch. She didn't react with anger. Her voice stayed steady, clear, deliberate. No, she corrected him softly, firmly. You tested control. The silence between them stretched. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was charged. Each heartbeat, each exhale, each breath measured and deliberate. Sarah picked up a folder from the desk. Its weight grounded her. Her fingers brushed the edges. She slid it across to him. Mark's eyes followed it instinctively. He bent slightly, lifting it. His fingers grazed hers. The contact was electric, unspoken, undeniable. He looked up. The folder was the symbol of power he had never anticipated. I'm giving you 30 days, she said. Her tone was neutral, firm, unyielding. Your lease ends in 30 days. Mark's shoulders dropped. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. Not immediately. Something inside him shifted. The office that had once been his fortress, his kingdom, now felt fragile. He could feel the walls closing, not literally but metaphorically. Every decision he had made, every empire he had built, now rested in her hands. She didn't wait for a response. Instead, she leaned against the edge of the desk, arms crossed, eyes locked on him. There was no warmth in her posture, no apology, no invitation, just presence, authority. Mark tried again. This isn't fair, he said, voice low. Even the words sounded weak to him. She tilted her head slightly. Her eyes softened just a fraction. Not pity, not remorse, but clarity. "I didn't build this to be fair," she said. Her voice was steady, but to be right. Mark swallowed hard. Her words cut deeper than any insult in the ballroom. He wanted to argue. He wanted to reclaim something, anything, to reassert dominance. But every instinct, every memory of the past week reminded him he was no longer in control. She handed him another folder, not with malice, not with gloating, just information, contracts, lease agreements, credit adjustments, legal notices, every detail meticulously documented, every piece of power accounted for. Mark flipped through it slowly. Each page was another strike against him, another reminder of his miscalculation. The silence stretched, not awkward, not tense for show, but loaded, full of unsaid truths, full of realizations that the man who thought he owned the world was now a visitor. Sarah's eyes followed him carefully. He paused on a page, jaw tight. Every gesture, every breath she observed quietly. There was a rhythm to her authority, a calm, steady beat, not one that could be challenged lightly. Mark realized he had underestimated her completely. The woman behind the desk wasn't the girl who had cried silently while working 3 jobs. She wasn't the woman who had endured humiliation at his hands. She was a force of nature cloaked in composure. He closed the folder. Finally, no words, no arguments, only a long, slow exhale. The city outside continued its life, unaware of the seismic shift inside the office. He had thought he had power. Now he understood. He had been measuring it all wrong. She wasn't just wealth, just position, just influence. She was commanding presence itself. He wanted to ask questions, demand explanations, but the words stuck. His mind reeled. Every plan, every move he had calculated felt irrelevant. Sarah broke the silence. "I've made decisions while you were laughing," she said, voice calm. "Contracts, leases, ownerships, everything. You are welcome to review them, but the choices have already been made." Mark tried to step closer, to assert some ground. She didn't flinch, didn't move. Her calm authority held him at bay more effectively than force ever could. The room seemed smaller, the lights brighter, the air denser. Everything pointed to a single truth. The tables had turned. Mark's chest tightened, not from anger, not from fear, from the raw reality of being outmaneuvered and outclassed. He could feel his ego cracking in a way he had never experienced. His gaze met hers. There was no anger, no malice, only awareness, a subtle challenge in her eyes. Adapt or be left behind. He swallowed again, and for the first time, he understood. The woman he had tried to dominate, the woman he had humiliated, was no longer someone he could predict. She was unpredictable power itself. A gentle tap of her fingers on the desk reminded him of the weight he now faced. Not physical, not legal, but personal, emotional, undeniable. She spoke again. "Your lease, your access, your privileges, they all end in 30 days. Use the time wisely." Mark's hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to argue. He wanted to storm the room. But he knew he couldn't. Not yet. The silence lingered, heavy, full of tension, regret, and an unspoken question. What comes next when the world you controlled is no longer yours? Mark finally met her gaze fully, and in that heartbeat, he realized something terrifying. For the first time in his life, Sarah Johnson was not waiting for him to catch up. She was already ahead. Outside the window, the city lights flickered, and in the shadows beyond the glass, someone was watching both of them, waiting to see how the next move would unfold. Mark didn't sleep that night. Not a single hour of rest had come. The city lights through his apartment window blurred into streaks. They mocked him. He had thought he was untouchable, master of everything, but she had changed the rules while he slept. He replayed every moment he had ignored, every quiet act of generosity she had performed while he took credit, knowingly or not. The bills she had paid in silence to keep his office running. The calls she had made, negotiating late nights with investors who had laughed at him. The nights she stayed up just to hear his voice calm enough to sleep. The moments she believed in him when no one else would. All of it. And he had taken it for granted. Elena didn't ask. She never had. She simply leaned against his arm at the lounge, smiled when he smiled, and said nothing about the foundations he had built with her support. Sarah always had, always noticed, always encouraged, always believed. Mark's chest tightened. Painful, new, not from anger, not from loss, not from financial crisis alone, but from the raw, aching realization that he had ignored the one person who truly mattered. He didn't lie awake thinking about revenge. He didn't plot. He didn't curse her name. He felt humility, something unfamiliar, something sharp, something that burned and cleared at the same time. By dawn he was dressed, his clothes carefully chosen, crisp, familiar, authoritative. But inside he felt stripped of pretense, not because Sarah had humiliated him, not because he had lost his headquarters, but because he had finally looked back and seen her for who she truly was. He drove through the city in silence. No music, no calls, just the steady hum of tires on asphalt, the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. He arrived at the building she now commanded. Every step up the marble floors was heavier than he expected. The elevator ride was long enough for him to remember the ballroom, the laughter, the gasps, the humiliation, the calm, unwavering fine that had shattered his assumptions about her. He stepped out on the top floor. The office door loomed before him. The nameplate gleamed softly under the overhead light. Sarah Johnson, managing trustee. He lifted his hand, paused, then knocked, not demanding, not forceful, but uncertain. Tentative, a man stripped of arrogance. The door opened. She was there, calm, composed, like a queen in a court that had once been his. He didn't step in immediately. He lingered, measured. He searched for words. He didn't want to seem weak. He didn't want to grovel. He wanted to reach her, but he didn't know how. Finally, he said softly, "I'm sorry. Not for losing power, not for losing money, not for losing the empire he had built, but because he had lost her." Sarah listened. Her posture didn't change. Her expression didn't soften immediately. He noticed the subtle shift, the faint raising of an eyebrow. She was alert, not defensive, not reactive. She was measuring sincerity. "That's new," she said quietly. He swallowed. It's real," he said. "I'm not apologizing because I need to get back what I lost. I'm apologizing because I see now what I took for granted." The office seemed to shrink. Every contract, every document, every detail that had established her authority, none of it mattered more than this moment. A pause. Sarah studied him, not with contempt, not with judgment, just observation, the quiet, deliberate kind that sees everything and acknowledges nothing unless it deserves attention. "I spent years being invisible to you," she said softly, "supporting you, enduring, believing, and yet I wasn't seen." Mark nodded. Her words didn't sting. They clarified. Every word was a mirror reflecting his mistakes. He felt small, yes, but aware. And for the first time, he welcomed the smallness. It allowed him to see clearly. "I was blind," he admitted, "blind to what mattered." Her eyes softened slightly. Not completely, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement, a hint, something subtle, like the first light before dawn. "You think saying sorry will fix this?" she asked. Her tone wasn't mocking, it was curious. Mark exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "I know it won't. But it's a start." The pause stretched between them, long enough for him to feel the weight of every decision, every failure, every lost moment. Then the faint sound of heels echoed behind him. Not in the office, not from the hallway outside, But somewhere near the doorway, he had not noticed. A figure stepped forward, tall, elegant, confident, eyes sharp, observant, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Miss Johnson," the newcomer said. Mark turned slightly. Sarah's posture didn't change. Her attention split, careful, precise. The newcomer held a thin leather folder. "From the board," he said. His presence shifted the room instantly. He wasn't aggressive, but he claimed attention effortlessly. Mark realized instantly, this was a man who knew influence, knew leverage, and knew timing. Sarah's eyes flicked to Mark briefly. No words, just a subtle, controlled acknowledgement of his presence. Mark felt it. The first time in years, he truly felt the weight of someone else's control over his fate. Sarah spoke, calm, commanding. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Kane. Please, sit." Mark stayed where he was. His mind raced. This was new, unexpected, challenging, and terrifying. The boardman, Kane, smiled faintly. He handed Sarah the folder. "I believe you'll want to see this before making any further decisions regarding the company," he said. Mark's chest tightened. The quiet authority she wielded wasn't just power, it was alliance, strategy, foresight. He realized fully he had been outmaneuvered in ways he hadn't even imagined. Sarah opened the folder. Her eyes scanned rapidly, then lifted to meet Kane's. Mark watched. Every subtle gesture, every nod, every blink. It was a dance he no longer understood, and he feared the steps he had lost. Sarah stood on the stage of a modest but bright auditorium. No chandeliers, no hundreds of guests dressed in gold and confidence, just women who had been silenced, ignored, trapped in lives that demanded compliance and hidden sacrifices. She looked at them, not as a billionaire, not as a former fiancé of a man who thought power was control, but as someone who had walked the exact path of quiet endurance and had come out standing. The microphone in her hand felt heavy, not from its weight, but from the responsibility it carried. Every word she spoke was deliberate, measured with intention. "This foundation," she said softly, "is not about proving anything to anyone." She paused. Let the words sink in. "They're about recognizing our worth, about reclaiming autonomy, about building a life where we decide the rules and the pace." She scanned the audience. Faces varied, angry, cautious, tired, hopeful, and yet every pair of eyes met hers with curiosity, searching for guidance, seeking permission to believe in themselves. She had been that woman, and she had wanted someone to say, "You can, you deserve, you are enough." The applause was quiet but steady, not dramatic, not performative, real. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke softly but firmly. "You didn't just leave, you led." Sarah turned. A woman stood there, confident, grounded, observant, eyes sharp yet warm, the kind of eyes that had seen hardship and had refused to bow. "I'm Maya Reed," the woman said, approaching. "Journalist, survivor." She held herself with the air of someone who had survived the same kind of manipulation, the same silent subjugation, and had come out the other side. Sarah nodded, intrigued. Maya continued, "I've covered stories about women trapped by men, by fear, by expectation. But you did something different. You didn't just leave. You reclaimed, you rebuilt, you created a space for others to do the same." Sarah smiled, not the kind of smile that seeks validation, not a triumphant grin, but a grounded, calm acknowledgement of the journey she had endured and the purpose she now carried. "I'm not healing to prove anything," Sarah said quietly. "I'm healing because I deserve peace, and because others deserve to see that peace is possible." Maya's eyes softened. A connection formed, one built on recognition, respect, and shared understanding. "You're going to make an impact," Maya said. Sarah exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the words settle. It wasn't about wealth anymore. It wasn't about Mark or the empire she had inherited. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about choice. Choice that belonged to her alone. The day after the first foundation event, Maya returned with a proposal, a project she had been planning for months. One that would expose hidden injustices, create safe spaces, and tell stories of women whose voices had been ignored. "I want to work with you," Maya said, eyes bright with urgency and sincerity. Sarah studied her. There was something about the woman that mirrored her own determination, something in her that could amplify the work already begun. She nodded. "Yes," Sarah said. "Yes, we will do this." Together they planned, strategy meetings late into the night, coffee-fueled brainstorming, maps of outreach, letters, emails, partnerships, media contacts. Sarah realized something unexpected. This wasn't just philanthropy, it was revolution. And she wasn't doing it alone. Maya became not just a partner, but a mirror, a reminder of the lives they were both trying to protect and empower. Meanwhile, Mark was nowhere in her mind. The man who had once tested her, humiliated her, and underestimated her was irrelevant here. For the first time, she was fully untethered. Her work, her purpose, her authority, these were hers alone. Yet, even in this new chapter, she couldn't ignore the subtle movements of the city's power. The empire she now controlled was vast, and with power comes attention. Kane, the boardman, was still in play, observing, advising, calculating. He was a reminder that Sarah's victory wasn't total, control was delicate, enemies could appear in shadows, and opportunity often arrived in unexpected forms. One evening, after another long day at the foundation office, Sarah stayed behind, organizing papers, reviewing outreach plans, checking emails. Maya had left, promising to return in the morning with new leads. The office was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Then a knock at the glass door. She looked up. A man in a tailored suit stood there, confident, poised, unnerving. He held a tablet in his hand. He didn't introduce himself immediately. He simply smiled faintly, eyes glinting with intelligence and caution. "I believe you've been expecting someone," he said, voice smooth, calm. Sarah straightened. Not fear, not panic. Curiosity, professionalism, power. "Who are you?" she asked, steady. The man extended a hand with a confident, deliberate motion. "Alexander Cross," he said. "Let's just say, I have an interest in your work, and in how you've been reclaiming the space that many thought impossible." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. Not distrust, not hesitation, evaluation. Alexander Cross, a new player, a new variable, someone who could either strengthen her mission or complicate it entirely. She studied him. A subtle smile formed on her lips. "This office is about rebuilding," she said, "not playing games." Alexander's smile widened just slightly. "Not playing games," he agreed. "But in this city, the lines are never clear, and power, even yours, Miss Johnson, draws attention in ways most people don't anticipate." Sarah leaned back. Her mind raced. The city was changing. Her foundation was growing. Her empire was strong. But she knew, as she met Alexander's gaze, that the next choice could alter everything she had worked for and everything she had yet to achieve. Alexander Cross stepped closer. "I'm here because someone wants to see your downfall, and someone else wants to see you rise. The question is, which side are you going to play?" Sarah's breath caught. Maya's voice echoed in her mind. "You lead, you don't follow." And in that moment, Sarah realized the real challenge was just beginning. Mark sat in the quiet of his apartment, staring at the city skyline. The lights no longer dazzled him the way they once had. Not after the lessons of the last weeks. The skyscraper he had once called his empire now felt like a relic, a monument to pride unchecked. He had stepped away from Elena, from noise, from the constant chatter of approval, the laughter that had always masked ambition, the shallow smiles that hid manipulation. He needed to start over, smaller, slower, honest. He opened his phone. The screen glowed softly in the dim room. Sarah's name appeared, but he didn't type something dramatic. No demands, no apologies layered in charm, no manipulations disguised as regret. Instead, he typed, "I hope you're well." A simple sentence, straightforward, unadorned. He hesitated, then pressed send. Minutes passed. He stared at the ceiling, fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the desk. Then he typed another message. "I'm learning." Short, patient, honest. No pressure, no expectation. The truth was simple. He didn't know how she would receive him. He didn't know if she wanted to hear from him at all. And that realization, a quiet, persistent ache in his chest, was humbling. He didn't try to charm her. He didn't try to impress her. He simply existed in the space of possibility, not entitlement, not control, just possibility. Hours passed, and in the quiet of the night another message appeared in his drafts. "No pressure," he typed again, this time more to himself than to her. He exhaled slowly. The first time he had ever breathed like this, after humiliation, after losing power, after watching her rise, untethered, commanding, brilliant, without him. It wasn't weakness. It was growth. Mark realized the charm he had once wielded so carelessly had never created connection. Not the kind that mattered. Not the kind Sarah demanded. Now, being gentle, patient, real, it was terrifyingly unfamiliar, yet strangely freeing. He spent days thinking about what it meant to approach her without expectation, to approach her without trying to reclaim what he had lost, to approach her without ego. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her work at the foundation. Maya by her side, Alexander observing quietly, and Mark, lingering in the background of her thoughts, but carefully. Not intrusive, not demanding. Mark had learned to wait, not because he wanted forgiveness, but because he wanted to show growth without words, without performance. He drafted messages late at night, deleting half of them, polishing the ones he sent, thinking carefully. Would these words feel genuine? Would she see the difference between charm and sincerity? He remembered the ballroom, the humiliation, the calm, unyielding fine that had set her free. He didn't want to repeat the past. He wanted to learn from it. He typed another message, paused, then deleted it. The silence became a discipline. He learned that absence, when coupled with sincerity, could speak louder than words. Mark found himself visiting the city's small coffee shops, not for business meetings, not for show, but to observe life quietly, to see the pace of people who worked, who struggled, who survived without relying on wealth or authority to define them. He began journaling, writing down moments he had taken for granted, moments he had failed to notice, moments Sarah had been the quiet engine behind his success. Every memory etched into the pages of his notebook. Realizations struck him with increasing frequency. Sarah had always been extraordinary, and he had failed to honor her. Elena had never challenged him this way. She had smiled, yes. She had accommodated, yes. But she had never forced him to see himself as he truly was. Mark's messages became more deliberate, more reflective. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know I understand now. I've been wrong." He didn't expect a reply, and when one finally arrived, it was brief. Actions will speak louder than words. The message wasn't a reprimand. It wasn't closure. It was a test. Mark smiled faintly, not with triumph, but with determination. He understood patience would be his teacher, humility his guide, and sincerity his only weapon. Alexander Cross observed this from the shadows, not openly, not intrusively, but deliberately. Mark's transformation intrigued him. There was potential here, and danger. Sarah's empire, her foundation, her rising influence, everything was intertwined. and Mark's slow, gentle approach could either support her mission or destabilize the delicate balance she had built. Meanwhile, Maya noticed subtle changes in Sarah, not in her leadership, not in her brilliance, but in the way her thoughts occasionally lingered on Mark's messages, not longing, not distraction, but curiosity, careful, cautious curiosity. It was a small thread of tension that neither of them acknowledged openly, yet it added a new layer to the unfolding story. Mark was learning to be gentle, to wait, to honor boundaries, to rebuild trust, step by deliberate step. The city outside continued its pulse, unaware of the personal revolutions taking place within quiet offices and private homes. Every decision Sarah made now was deliberate, every observation measured, every interaction with Alexander, Maya, and Mark was a strategic balance of power, emotion, and principle. And yet, despite the careful equilibrium, an undercurrent ran through the foundation, the office, and the city streets. Something unseen, calculated, ready to intervene. Sarah, as brilliant and commanding as ever, did not yet know that Mark's gentle approach would soon collide with forces beyond her anticipation. The patience he cultivated was a weapon in disguise. The gentleness he practiced was a test in disguise. And the next steps, hers, his, and Alexander's, would determine who truly held the future in their hands. The gala hall shimmered under crystal chandeliers, a warm golden glow that softened the edges of the room. Women moved confidently, not as ornaments, but as architects of their own futures, laughing, planning, dreaming, plotting steps they would take beyond the confines of expectation. Sarah stood near the center of it all, a figure calm and commanding, yet approachable. She wasn't there to dominate. She was there to inspire. Maya was beside her, moving from group to group, introducing women to one another, connecting ideas, sharing strategies. Sarah watched, a quiet satisfaction settling into her chest. Not pride, not vanity, just the clarity of knowing the work she had begun, the foundations she had laid, was alive, growing, unstoppable. A gentle hum of conversation filled the room. Not fake laughter, not forced pleasantries, but the genuine warmth of shared purpose. Sarah's eyes scanned the crowd. Then, almost imperceptibly, she felt a shift in the air. Outside the glass doors, rain streaked the windows, soft and relentless, and through the silver curtain of water, a figure appeared. Mark. He didn't rush in, he didn't call her name, he didn't bring charm or apologies. He simply stood, shoulders squared, head bowed slightly against the rain, not begging, not demanding, not performing, just understanding. For the first time, he wasn't trying to corner her. He wasn't trying to reclaim control or to prove anything. He was merely acknowledging what had always been true. She was hers. Inside, Sarah turned slightly, sensing the presence without needing to confront it. The gala continued around her. Maya leaned close, whispering, "She's noticed him." Sarah didn't respond. Not yet. She had no reason to. Her eyes, sharp and deliberate, stayed on the conversations, on the women who had built something tangible from pain, from silence, from struggle. Alexander Cross was present too, quietly observing from the edges. He had tracked power, influence, and intention, but tonight even he recognized the balance had shifted. Sarah had grown beyond expectation, beyond strategy, beyond even his calculations. Mark's silhouette lingered, an unspoken presence. He hadn't entered, hadn't interrupted, hadn't attempted to reclaim what was never his to take. Sarah's heart registered it, not with relief, not with temptation, but with understanding. The man had changed, finally, genuinely. She remembered the ballroom, the excruciating fine, the empire she had built from that moment onward. Every victory, every foundation, every strategic decision had led to this quiet power, this unshakable confidence, this peace that no one could now take away. Mark finally stepped closer to the building's entrance. He didn't call her. He didn't wave. He simply waited. And in that waiting, he gave her something he never could have in the ballroom, in the offices, or in the battles that had followed. He gave her autonomy, freedom, the right to lead without distraction, the choice to decide if he would ever matter again in her world. Inside, Sarah's eyes flickered to Maya. "I think he's learning," Maya whispered. Sarah nodded subtly. "About patience," she replied, "and about respect." The crowd continued to celebrate, oblivious to the small yet monumental drama unfolding outside in the rain. Mark adjusted his jacket against the falling drops, watching through the glass. Not a plea, not a show. Just a silent acknowledgement that the life Sarah had chosen and built with her own hands was beyond his claim. Inside, Sarah's focus returned to the women around her. She moved through the crowd gracefully, listening, advising, connecting. Every conversation she had reinforced her purpose. Every laugh she shared reminded her of how far she had come. Every plan, every new connection, every spark of ambition mirrored the fire she had carried in herself for so long. Alexander watched, calculating, silent, intrigued. Even he could see that tonight Sarah was untouchable in ways money or charm could never reach. The rain outside intensified. Mark stayed where he was. No entry, no disturbance, just understanding. And that understanding was enough. Enough to heal, enough to reflect, enough to transform him quietly into the man who could finally learn to love without control, without ego, without performance. The night pressed on inside. Sarah's foundation presented new projects, new programs, new opportunities for women to reclaim their power. Maya guided conversations, ensuring momentum continued beyond the gala. Sarah occasionally glanced at the rain-streaked glass. Mark remained, quietly observing, allowing the narrative to unfold on her terms. No interruption, no demand, just acknowledgement. And Sarah knew, finally, the world she had created wasn't just hers. It was shared, sustained, and inviolable. She had stepped forward, into power, into peace, into a life no one could ever take from her again. And in that moment, Mark understood the most important lesson he had never learned before. Love wasn't about possession. It was about recognition. It was about standing back when someone rises beyond expectation and letting them shine, without interference. The rain continued to fall. The lights glowed warmly. The women around her laughed, dreamed, and planned. And Sarah, she didn't look back, not even once, because she didn't need to.